Tell me about how you got involved in advocacy work.
Well, advocacy, okay. This goes back to the early 2000s. I was a chief of staff for a state senator at the time. And we received a call from a police captain, no, fire captain in one of the communities. And they said, we called the representative for this area, but he hasn't gotten back to us. We need someone to get over here immediately so you can see what's going on in this community. So I was the one to go. Went over to this community on the east side of Detroit, and it was July. It was about 90 degrees outside. I stepped out my car, and the air literally hit me. I mean, it literally hit me, and my head started pounding, and I got nauseated. And I mean, the air was so heavy with this foul smell. And come to find out that it was a wastewater treatment plant in a local income community. And they were supposed to treat wastewater from industry, even truck over from Canada. They were supposed to remove the heavy metals and dispose of the water, the wastewater. They were pouring the wastewater down the sewer system. It was coming up in people's homes through their basements. And this particular day, it was just with the heat, it had just exploded to a point where no more. So I got in, that led me into environmental work. I've always been an advocate, but that led me into environmental work and wanting to make sure that residents don't have to live in communities where their health is impacted, that I want them to be able to live where they are able to enjoy not only the built environment but the natural environment of their communities. I am so passionate about communities now that, I mean, I'm just passionate about it. This community taught me that there's babies coming here on breathing machines. There's seniors that can't enjoy their own homes because of environmental issues. Um, so that really got me into this environmental realm, and now that I'm in it, it's like, okay, shut down this, let's do this, let's do this. I, I just want us to be able to enjoy our communities, even the community I live in. I live in a low income community of color that is highly vacant. Lot of vacant lots. Lot of just, so I've been working to redevelop the community based on youth doing the work because I want them to stay in the community. I don't want them to leave. The young people wrote a paragraph for me on, I asked them to send a paragraph to someone that didn't live in Detroit describing their community or their city. And these, when I read the paragraphs, I literally cried. No, I literally, real tears. They were, do not come to Detroit. You will be raped, robbed, nothing but drugs, shootings, don't come to my community. You know, I mean, these kids were like, they were so ready to just leave Detroit. You know, when I turn 18, I'm out of here. I'm never coming back. And I'm thinking to myself, what have we done as adults that our kids are racing to leave the city? So that kind of spurred me to say, okay, we have to change this. You know, we have to change this perception. So I've been working with high school kids to really redevelop the community that I live in. You know, to make the built environment one that where they want to stay. You know, and to help spur the natural environment. We planted trees to help with the emissions in the community. You know, they developed two parks in the community. You know, They're working on home efficiency, so that some of the homeless families that where the kids go to the schools will have a house to live in. It's about teaching them leadership. So I'm trying to teach these young people how to be advocates for themselves, how to be advocates and leaders and turning this city around so that it becomes a place where they want to stay.
Would you like a glass of water?
No, I'm good. I just had to get that
Okay. Just so tell us a little bit about Michigan Environmental Council and what it does.
Michigan Environmental Council is 20 years old, and it really works within the capital to create environmental policy. We cover the whole state of Michigan. Our job is to create a clean, safe, and healthy Michigan for all residents. Um, we have member groups that we advocate for within the capital. The only program that's different, well, we have two programs that's kind of different from the policy aspect, although it's all policy. And that's my position here in Detroit. I only work in the city of Detroit, and my job is to turn Detroit green. And my work is grassroots and grass tops. I work in both arenas. We have another satellite office in Traverse City, and Kate's job up there, she's working around energy efficiency and getting cities to set energy goals. She's really working around climate change. Her thing is climate change. So we're those two areas. We're not in the capital. We're not in Lansing in the capital and trying to drive policy there. We're trying to drive policy in the individual cities. So in doing that, I work on. I've worked in the food arena. I sat on the Detroit Food Policy Council. Currently, I'm the co-chair with the Office of Sustainability on the sustainability agenda. I sit on the Detroit Environmental Agenda. I sit on D4, which is doing development differently in Detroit, which looks at making sure that as we develop these communities, that residents in the community have a say in it and that gentrification does not happen within these communities. I do transportation. I do water issues. Um, really working hard on water affordability in the city of Detroit. Um, I do lead issues. I work on lead. I am a community leader. I lead the Ninth Precinct Community Relations Council. I also lead the Denby Neighborhood Alliance, which is a group that was started by my young people in 2014, and I've been leading that ever since. Um, so I sit on quite a few groups. I even sit on a Detroit Horsepower. I'm trying to get horses in the city of Detroit.
Ooh.
So my kids can see something different.
Yeah.
My kids don't know, anything about horses. So we have the okay, and we're gonna go ahead and build a horse equestrian center on the west side of Detroit for the kids. Well, for everybody, but so. Um, those are a lot of the things that I do, and I do them under the scope of the Michigan Environmental Council because they all either lead to a better natural environment or a better built environment.
So, how does water security enter into the scope of what the MEC does? Um, can you talk us through about how the MEC got interested in issues related to water security and access, and maybe how that work that the MSC has been doing for a while has perhaps changed or evolved over time to address some of these issues that we just talked about?
MEC has always been involved in water issues. We've always been involved in the Great Lakes issues. We all have always sat on a commission around DWSD. Um, but the Flint water crisis moved us into residential water security issues. Our former boss, Chris Kolb, was actually tasked by then Governor Snyder to be a co-chair on the Flint Water Task Force. So he actually, with my insistence, because I am a big environmental justice advocate, that's my thing, and so constantly putting that in his ear. Look at this from an environmental justice perspective. You have to look at it from an environmental justice perspective. They were able to come out with a set of recommendations around the water crisis, but a set of recommendations that would benefit everybody in the state of Michigan. One of the recommendations was for EJ ombudsman, where if you have issues, you are able to call someone. Because it is no reason that anyone that gets brown water out of their tap should not be able to get a response from the state of Michigan about what's going on with my water. And that didn't happen. So that resulted in a lot of health impacts to residents. And that's a EJ issue, but it's an EJ issue that can happen anywhere in the state of Michigan. Flint just happened to be where it happened at. So my boss was tasked with being on this environmental justice task force, and of course, you know, they did the who's at fault, but they also did like 65 recommendations. And our current governor, Whitmer, is looking at those, and she is really developing um, different offices in her administration that will cover these environmental justice issues. Her first directive out the gate in January was around the EJ issue and a climate change office, you know, uh, because of the fact that she was getting rid of the rules and regulations committee or something. That's what kind of hung it up, because
Oversight.
yeah, the oversight committee, which was fully industrial. Okay, it was manned by industry. That kind of hung it up. But the idea that someone is really looking at creating a space where residents can literally touch their state government around issues that are impacting their daily life. Um, so I love the idea that MEC was able to be a part of that. I like the idea that Governor Snyder created an environmental justice work group that my boss was also a part of. He co-chaired, because that was able to bring industry, environmentalists, and environmental justice advocates together to create a environmental justice directive for the state of Michigan. So I love that idea. We had did that back in 2010 under Governor Granholm, but when Snyder came in the office, it got thrown on the shelf, and nobody. It had been watered down, but it was still some good points in there. But it got thrown on the shelf, and one of the greatest things that MEC was able to do, and it came out of the original directive that Granholm signed, was to create an intra-agency working group. So anything major happening, you have to take it before this intra-agency working group. That way, had someone from MDEQ, when they made the decision to allow them to switch off to the Flint River, would have had to go before the Department of Health. They would have had to go before Health and Human Services. They would have had to go before all these departments, and somebody somewhere would have said, okay, how would this impact the health of those residents? You know, that way you got different perspectives to look at a project or look at a decision that one of the agencies is making. So that was a great thing. So then Mott, as you know, the Mott Foundation is based in Flint. They said, okay, we can't have this happen again. This has happened right up under our nose where our home is, you know. So they have tasked a lot of different groups across the state of Michigan with working on water issues. So MEC has developed a water toolkit. And so on our website, we have this water toolkit. And what it does is it looks at well water as well as tap water. It looks at water across the state of Michigan because not everyone goes in the kitchen and get their water, you know, we still got people that live on wells, you know. So it looks at quality of water, affordability of water, where your water comes from. I mean, the toolkit is so extensive, it even tells people how to read their water bill. You know, because most people don't read their water bill. They get a water bill, they pay it. You know, they look at the cost, but they're not looking over here to see what the cost is really for. You know, so it teaches people how to read their water bills. So this toolkit is so is needed because water before was never an issue for people, so they weren't concerned with it until Flint. So now, across the state of Michigan, we have groups that are providing people with enough information to educate them so that when they take that bill and go to the water company, they know exactly what they're talking about. They may not be able to get into details, but they have enough education to know what they're talking about, and they can walk in there and speak on their own behalf. Because you know our water company here in the city of Detroit has even gotten it where you can't take an advocate in with you. You know, advocates are not allowed to go into the customer service area with you when you're talking about your water bill. So you have to be educated on what you need to say. And this toolkit helps residents to get that information. And that's important. So MEC is, we're now going out and we're taking that water toolkit and having different groups vet it out and make sure we got everything we need. So that's our entry into water right now is the water, the tier water rate. We sit on that table trying to come up with how do we come up with an affordability plan across the state of Michigan, not just Detroit. And people always say, you know, Detroit is different, and Detroit is different. But how do we come up with a tier water plan? Because it has to be adjustable city by city or county by county. So we're working to see how we can come up with a tier water rate because everyone deserves water. But everyone deserves water based on how much they can afford to pay. I should not be able to get water because I can pay $100 and you can't get it because you can only pay 25. That's crazy to me. My 100 should be able to balance out your 25. Okay? If we have people, you know, paying their full water bills and we know they're making money, so there's some extra money there that you can help balance out what someone else is paying. So that's our entry into water.
What's the what progress do you think you're making on those discussions about the tiered water plan? That seems, the reason I ask is especially because that seems to be the centerpiece of a lot of the community organizing and activism movement happening within the city. And so, to what extent are you seeing those ongoing negotiations sort of unfold?
Well, we're really at the beginning. We just had a study commissioned by Roger Colston,
Mm-hmm.
and so we talked about that yesterday, and we're still kind of like, okay, if we're going to do this, would we do it, trying to decide, would we do it regionally, try to implement this regionally, or would it be city by city? So we're still at that point.
Was this a new plan or was it his old 2005 plan?
No, this is his new plan.
Oh,
If I send you a copy, if I send you a copy, don't shop it around,
sure.
but you could take a look at it because it may have some. You may be able to educate me because I'm not technical.
Sure, and we'll edit this part
Yeah,
out.
edit
yeah,
that
yeah,
part
yeah.
out,
Yeah.
and I'll send you a copy of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you could take a look. You might be able to educate me on it because I'm not a technical person. I'm a community activist. I am a community advocate. So don't ask me anything technical, but I can tell you how it impacts the people in the city of Detroit. And that's what I do.
Who are some? We're back to it. Yeah, rolling then.
Okay.
Who are some of your major partners? Because you work with both grassroots and grass tops. So who are your partners on both the grassroots sides and the grass top side?
Monica Patrick Lewis. I just hold her up. She's my woman warrior on water. I'm sorry because her and Sylvia, and I can't think of Sylvia's last name. Yes, and they sit on the tier water group with me. And these women have been out there lugging water to people, setting up water stations, making sure that people's kids aren't taken, going to the water company with people. That's why they stopped letting people come in because they were going with them, to talk about these water bills. These women have been so at it on the ground, and I'm normally on the ground. But I have not been on the ground with water the way they have. And what I tell them is whatever I can do to support you, I'm there. You know, yeah, I'm part of the creating the water toolkit, but I'm not on the ground doing that. And these are the grassroots people that I think are amazing, you know. And some of the organizations, and we all belong to different groups, like we all belong to the National Equity Water Table around affordability. But we work with Freshwater Future. We work with um, Healing Our Waters. We work with, it's hard thinking about these groups. The Herb Foundation. They're a big person around water, along with Mott, which is one of the greatest things I ever seen. There's two foundations that are sitting at the same table working together on this issue as partners, with grassroots, and with organizations. So that's a great table, that tier water rate table. Um, so nationally, the group we sit on Policy Link, which is all about equitable water. Um, so it's probably about 20 different organizations out there that MOD has probably funded to do water. And they bring them all to the table. They're all at the table on this water tier rate because affordability is so important.
Where do you see the movement to address water security, affordability? Where do you see it headed?
I see the movement to address water affordability. I see us headed in the right direction. And I think with the backing of major foundations, I think especially, well, across the state of Michigan, especially Detroit and Flint, that water affordability policy will probably shift in those areas because people would be surprised at how many foundational dollars are helping to run cities. You know, A lot of city projects do not come up under the general fund dollars or those departmental dollars. Those dollars are coming from foundations. And I think that they are beginning to listen to foundations because they're willing to invest money into cities. They want cities to be successful. So a lot of decision makers are beginning to listen to a lot of these foundations. And I think that having the foundations supporting this issue will probably move it a lot quicker than our grassroots efforts. But because they support the grassroots efforts, I think that's why the city is going to start listening to people like Monica and Sylvia, on this issue.
What about some of the other structural problems that still remain? You know, I mean, um, structural racism, for instance, regional regional tensions, sort of, I mean, the between Detroit and its suburbs, for instance, but also, when we were talking earlier about uh, how there seems to have been a sort of this historical breakdown in terms of what different parts of the city government, whether it's DWSD or whether it's keeping landlords accountable. I mean, those are really complex issues that not a lot of people readily associate with water. You think contamination or lead, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you have all of these other institutional issues. And so I'm curious as to how you see what can be done or how we can address some of these broader issues as well that are also still very much there.
Okay. So I begin this by saying that I love my city. I love my city. I love my city. I love my city. However, structural racism, institutionalized racism, all of it is so very prominent in the city of Detroit. And for me to truly answer that question, people won't like what I have to say. Okay? I'm saying that the only reason this city is moving forward is not for those of us that chose to stay here, because people have this idea that everyone in the city of Detroit is poor. Okay, everybody that had money, they moved away. Okay, that's not true. I can live anywhere I want to live. I love my city. I choose to stay here and work to bring my city back to some glory. So I think that a lot of the movement that has been made in the city of Detroit is not made for me. It's not geared towards me. It was made to entice a new population to come into the city of Detroit that does not look like me, that does not think like me. Um, I tend to ride the tide because I could snatch a little here and there for my community to make my community better. I take real offense that downtown Detroit is now Gilbertville, and that's what residents call it. We call it Gilbertville. It's not downtown Detroit. I take offense that residents no longer just go downtown because they don't feel like it was built for them. I take offense that 90% of the jobs are geared towards people outside the city of Detroit. I take offense that Detroiters, when looking for jobs, have to go outside of the city for those jobs. Um, so, structural racism alive and kicking in the city of Detroit. Um, I worked hard to get to get a light rail down Woodward. And as I'm educating the residents, and we had the funding to do the light rail from downtown to 8 Mile. And as I'm educating the residents, I'm steady saying community benefits agreement. They had 12 stops. and I held a meeting at each one of those stops, and I'm saying to residents, community benefits agreement. If they put a stop in your community, you make sure that you have an agreement on the table beforehand that you, one, will not be pushed out of your homes. You will not be taxed out of your homes. Two, that people in your community receive jobs. Three, that people are not going to be parking their car across my driveway so they can go catch the transit. I mean, little things but big things. You know, I just see Detroiters being those that stayed and maintained, really being pushed out, and not so much being pushed out the city, just pushed out. That's how I want to say, just pushed out of the decision making, pushed out of anything related to how their city is going to operate. The city has never been one for engagement. We have this Office of Sustainability, and Joel used to be grassroots just like me. So we started a lot of these groups together. And I think that is probably the best engagement that I have seen as far as reaching out to everyday people. Um, so when these big decisions are made in the city, they're not incorporating residents. We build up downtown and leave the communities and neighborhoods to rot. If people come across 8 Mile and they don't take the freeway, they have to come through my community to come downtown. You understand what I'm saying? So why wouldn't you build up community? I've seen them give away land to developers, partials, and residents can't buy the lot next door to them because that's part of the bundle that they gave away. Because they'd rather give away bundles of land than piecemeal it here and there. And that's kind of understandable, but residents that have stayed should always have first choice. I've seen the city hold a last day to buy land in your community, which is on the west side, but the meeting was held on the east side. Okay, how many residents can get to the meeting? I've seen so much that have been done against the residents that have stayed in the city, that structural racism, and I'm going to say this, it may not be a black and white issue. I think it's a Detroit resident issue. And we got white residents that stayed just like the black ones stayed. Okay? And they're experiencing the same thing. The very same thing. It's about against Detroiters. This Detroiter. The mayor says there's no 2 Detroits. There's 2 Detroits. Those that you're doing for and those that you're not doing for. That's my 2 Detroits. So that's my that's my take on structural racism. It's about Detroiters. Those that stayed. They have no say in this city whatsoever.
So, how can we address some of these problems with regard to water, for instance? I mean, we're talking about having legislation or grassroots action on water affordability, the tier rate problem, but as we're seeing that some of these broader issues are still persisting, what can we do, or how can we hold people accountable to address some of these situations? Or are you seeing examples where people are sort of trying to address these issues and hold some of these organizations accountable?
No, it's not.
It's not happening.
Okay, so how we address these issues, and how do we hold these people accountable? I said earlier that elected officials work for me. Okay, I'm their boss. And if I don't vote for them, they don't get in office. Okay, that's my thought. So we have to really start in the election process holding elected officials accountable. But once they get in office, if they don't live up to what they say they're going to do, we have to make sure they don't get back in office.
Mm-hmm.
Because, see, they can make a whole lot of promises ahead of time. But once they get in and we see they're not upholding their campaign promises, then we have to make sure they don't get back in. And it's about education. There is nobody, did I say that in English correctly? There is no one currently addressing the water issue that, as an elected official in the city of Detroit, be it in the legislative body or the executive body. There's no one. Gary Brown has been given a green light to do whatever he wants to do where water is concerned. I mean, the way they even treat residents when they come with water concerns is an issue. It has been, and that's back to that Detroiter racism. They can talk to us any kind of way they want to talk to us. I literally got into it with one of the council people last week on an issue. They're demolishing a house. And as part of the environmental world, you know, we work to help draft the demolition process, which includes you must put a door hanger on a door within 400 feet of a house that you're demolishing because of the lead issues and other issues, because you may have children around and you may have older people around. Well, the night after the mayor gives his State of the City address and he talks about this process, very process of putting door hangers on, they demolish a house 2 doors down from me. No door hangers. So I go out and I say, you know, you didn't notify anyone that you were going to tear this house down. You have a baby that lives right next door to the house you're tearing down, and you have a 3-year-old that lives directly across the street. Both of these kids can be impacted by this demolition. I don't have to do that. Hold on. You're in my community. Yes, you do have to follow the process. I, in turn, call City Hall, call the neighborhood office, and I tell them, you know, what has happened. I tell a council person, they told me you're not supposed to talk to a contractor. I told them, what do you mean? He's in my community. He's impacting the health of my residents in my community, and you tell me I can't say anything to him? I'm sorry, that's my community. I am of the community association. I can speak to him. And he was doing something wrong. Well, you shouldn't have said anything to him. Why not? He's demolishing a house. And we got babies on the block within 400 feet. Why shouldn't I be out there trying to stop him from doing something that may impact their health? For a council person to say that to me told me right then and there, they're not sitting at that table for my benefit. Okay? So it's about educating around who we elect and holding them accountable. And when they don't do what they say they're going to do, you don't vote for them again. You make sure you get out there if they're running again and say, no, you did not live up to your campaign promises last time. We're not reelecting you. I am a firm believer you work for me when you're elected. And if you don't do your job, I don't care any job you have. If you do not do your job, your boss will fire you. I'm their boss. I'm firing them. You got me started.